Hello and welcome to Automated from the Automated Global World Capital Studios on the 75th floor of Polymath headquarters in the San Francisco Mission District. I, of course, am Stefan Oxmacher, and with me is, I don't know, some sort of guy wearing an R2-D2 shirt for some reason. Yesterday was Rocinante. Who exactly are you again?
Big fan of sci-fi and robotics in general.
Of course, this is Ilia Barodoff with me today, and you've tuned into Automated. Every week we talk about how to make robots and how to not make robots. We like to start every episode off with my favorite game, where we pick a random technology and a random setting for us to try to spitball a robot business out of, sometimes being very weird, sometimes being more or less something that you could see being an actual company. So for this week, Elliot, what's our broader topic going to be after this initial little game?
So as we hinted last episode, we're going to be talking about how to measure robots in general.
That can't be that hard. That will be a doozy. We can spend more time on this initial game. What's our setting this week, Ilya?
All right, let's see. We got Office.
And for the Office robots, we will be using...
You're just rejecting a whole bunch of them.
Yeah, we're rejecting a whole bunch of them. But actually, this one...
I feel some bias.
Yeah, there's definitely some bias in my selection. We'll be using VR for an Office robot.
Oh, nice. I have some first-hand experience.
Is why I ran through this. And I'd say this is going to be one where we could stumble into some real companies that, we don't want to do. And that's both from an interesting podcast and from a business perspective. Like I said, what are you talking about in terms of your experience of Office VR robots?
Yeah, let me start off with a little bit of a story. When ClearPath Robotics took over the PR2 program, I noticed that this was right around the time the very first Oculus had come out, and that kind of VR was just taking off. And I noticed somebody had put together a package to output 3D data from RViz in ROS, which is the kind of visualization data tool inside of ROS, to this VR headset, specifically for the PR2. And so as I was trying to learn the PR2, I set myself a goal to learn how to use this package to try to figure out what was going on. And you could move your head with the VR headset, and the robot's head would move as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it would...
Like an Apache attack helicopter.
Yeah. Much less threatening and much slower. Same idea. And the data from the LiDARs and the depth camera and all that would be projected kind of in this virtual reality augmented view, where you could kind of see beyond the borders of the sensors. You could see the physical position of the arms and that kind of stuff. Anyway, the fun part of the story was ClearPath decided to open their new offices with a ribbon cutting, and they wanted me to teleoperate the robot to come and cut the ribbon.
Mm-hmm.
And
So you had a robot driving around with scissors at high speeds around a crowded room.
Yeah, maybe not driving, maybe just standing still, but waving its arms around it at least.
And it's not a robot I want to be near.
Yeah, there's a nice safety barrier.
Yeah, and Kevlar vests worn by all.
But the funny part was I didn't want to just control the arms using like a joystick or something. I wanted to use the Microsoft Kinect to capture my skeleton and reproduce it on the robot. So if I moved, the robot would move and copy me. The problem
a bit like some of the Gundam. Yeah, some of the Gundam controls.
Exactly. Yeah. So like ultimate nerd dream, right? The problem ended up being that the Kinect output of the skeleton position was really noisy. And so the robot looked like it had Parkinson's. Anytime it would move, it would shake like crazy. And it could never get it. So we couldn't get it accurate enough to even cut the tape. What we ended up doing, just like any good, ribbon cutting, is we pre-cut a segment of the tape, taped it back, karate chop. Yeah, and it just karate chopped it, and that's how it got the ribbon cutting.
So that being said, I think we obviously are going to use Kinects to do body matching, like for our Office robot. I think in terms of like Office robots, I don't want to be double robotics like that. Like double robotics, like they've been around for a while. It's an interesting product. It's kind of the business that it is. They've accomplished a lot of cool stuff. I don't think we should talk about telepresence robots. That's been there, done that. I think that maybe, one of the areas that robots can help the Office is in team building exercises. Oh, more than telepresence.
With VR.
Yeah, with VR. Okay. Because like, if you think about it, in this world where people are increasingly remote, it seems like a lot of people are reclustering back in office, but there might be a couple of long-term stragglers, people who aren't going to live near the office, but they should still be able to be involved in the team building events. And there's usually a lot of stuff going on in team building. So you kind of need like a telepresence robot that can see 360 degrees so that like the person in VR can really feel like they're a part of the team building exercise. Whether it's a cheesy guy coming in and you know, figuring out what your spirit animal is, or a happy hour down the street.
So actually, really great note there, by the way. The 360 camera part that you mentioned, you kind of skim off of it, but that's actually really key to making that work. If you're trying to put a camera on a pan tilt, the delay between your head motion and the camera head motion is going to give you a horrendous nausea. Again, first experience.
So we need to see 360 degrees.
Right. 360 degrees is clever because
you could just cover the whole robot with cameras.
Well, maybe, and synthesize a view. But the idea is that when you move your VR headset, you're moving in an already pre-rendered image sphere. And so you won't get that motion sickness. Trying to do pan tilt, it's terrible.
Okay. So basically, we need a bunch of 360 cameras on a large like movable platform. I think, you know, team building exercises include things that are off campus, so it needs to be able to work like, you know, at least to the nearby bar, at least to like the nearby lunch spot.
I was taking this. We'll get back to the lunch spot, but like I was taking this the other way. You know, when I think of team building, I'm thinking like trust falls. And so what you do is you have the robot try to catch a person, and you don't know if the other person's just a jerk or if there's just a software bug and moved out of the way. And your team member can have full confidence of just being like, "Oh, you fell. Oh, it must be a bug. Sorry."
What was the direction you're thinking team building trust fall robot?
Well, team building like classic, you know, the more kind of summer camp team building style, like not.
Or you can have the robot go canoeing.
Yeah, that would be super effective.
You know, hopefully you put it in the middle. Maybe you can crouch a little bit on its wheelbase.
Oh boy, better Canadian activity.
I guess what the problem that I have in team building is it also reminds me too much of things people have actually tried to do. What's a weirder, wackier in office VR robot?
Yeah, so you want to change tags. Well, the classic, I mean, the obvious one is telepresence, but what's even stranger?
Yeah.
You
know what you could do, actually?
What?
So a robot's a really stupid platform to have a bunch of cameras on, right? Because we all have a camera on our laptop. We might have an exterior webcam, whatever. The problem is sometimes you try to ping somebody and like you're remote and you're not with them. So essentially, you try to Slack them, you try to email them, you try to call them. I don't know, maybe they walked away. What we need is like a drone with a long like poking stick, kind of like in the episode of Bob's Burgers.
The tap your shoulder.
Yeah, to tap your shoulder. And like we don't know where in the office they might be, so you use the VR to be able to more effectively, quickly pilot, like do drone racing, flying around the office to find the people you're hunting for.
With a stick.
Yeah.
I feel like safety glasses are going to be mandatory at this office.
You know, that is the price we pay for a broader eligible workforce.
Yeah. I mean, instead of,
and also we'll probably need these in everyone's homes.
Yeah, exactly. I'm good.
Since the people are working from home.
Yeah.
Like we've all seen those like Kickstarters for the companies that never shipped of like the really capable drones that were like about 6 inches by 6 inches.
Yeah, you could just do all the things.
Yeah, they can do all the things. So we basically put one of those in every employee's home office. And like, since it's work hours, if it's work hours, anyone on the team can take control of it, fly through their house, find them, and tap them on the shoulder.
Yeah, or in my case, when I bike to work and I'm on a call.
Oh, yeah.
It has to chase me down the bike lane.
There might be like a bigger one. There might be one that's more like the size of a Reaper drone that flies in low behind you and then drops a swarm of these that then chase you down to tap you on the shoulder while you're riding your bike, just so I can ask you, hey, by the way, where's our EIN number?
Yeah, I mean, why would you ever just install an app on your phone that has a notification?
What if you have your phone on silent? I need to be able to proactively ping people even when they don't want to be pinged.
I mean, you showed me your phone with like the 400-something notifications. I've just decided if I ever need to get a hold of you, I have to call you. There's just no other.
Oh, I texting does not work.
Yeah.
So if we're building this universal poker, we basically it needs a nesting pod that you can put on your desk, plug in, that it can easily fly to and from. It needs, I don't know,
That's a self-charge, right? So
Yeah, from that nesting pod.
yeah, there's no complexity on drones self-charging.
Well, just layers on that pod, and then some, some copper exposed.
Some wireless charging.
Yeah, inductive charge. It's all good.
Yeah, it's fine.
Probably like we might need like we'll Gen 2 will be able to hunt you down during your commute, but Gen 1 will just stay within your house to keep this problem simpler.
And VR teleoperated, so no real intelligence, right?
Yeah, you know
VR.
Well, I mean, I do, once I get the information that I'm interested in, I do tend to change subjects rather quickly. So I might need it to be able to fly itself back to where it started and park itself.
Well, in classic novice at robotics, the immediate thought would be like, oh, just replay all your commands backwards. That should be fine, right?
Yeah, why can't you do that?
Noise. The real world has noise and disturbances.
But I mean, if you're flying inside, there's not that much wind.
Oh, yeah. There's downdraft from your own rotors.
Okay.
Even a ground robot with really accurate encoders, if you try to get it to replicate, play back the same motion over and over, it'll drift off path after 2-3 iterations really, really quick.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we need to make it autonomous.
At least semi-autonomous.
Yep.
Yeah.
We need to, and it could pre-map. It could. This drone could regularly take off your desk, start flying around your house, mapping out every room to see where everything is.
I think if it's been VR piloted,
Yeah.
at least it's not going to exactly repeat the same commands to come back, but it already knows a reasonable path to take.
Yeah.
Right? So like it could take the path it took to get there and play it back, but just control to that path, not just dumbly repeat the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it doesn't even need a map at that point. It's just like,
Well, like what? Okay. Yeah.
localized, just local featured
Yeah.
recognition, not like trying to build a global.
Within your house.
Yeah, exactly. Just optical flow, which is a software trick where from your camera lens, as you see things move by, if you see something move by to the right in your camera frame, your camera has moved to the left. So you have that kind of optical flow software, you get roughly accurate, good enough to, navigate a few dozen meters kind of thing.
And then is there going to be any complication? I imagine this thing will be on Wi-Fi. We'll require our employees have good Wi-Fi connections. Is there any challenge with us doing live video streaming off that little drone on Wi-Fi to my VR headset?
Yeah. we won't get very high quality.
Okay.
We won't get, very large field of view or very high frame rate, but you could get something like, I don't know, I'm guessing 10 frames a second, kind of middling resolution.
So as long as we don't hire hoarders, we'll be relatively able to fly around.
Yeah. Kind of a rough view of the world.
We'll say this is only a tool for people who aren't hoarders. We're also okay with incredible invasions into their home space.
Yeah, it's not a problem to have a drone piloted by random office
Employees, yeah.
Potentially, office rivals of some kind.
Yeah, security will be a real issue with this particular drone. I think people might care about the security on this more than they care about actual predator drones. How would it mess up our controls models if it's essentially a quadcopter with a, call it 18-inch pole sticking out the side of it, or an 18-inch antenna used for poking?
How heavy is that antenna?
I mean, antenna, what weight?
Assuming
I'm thinking like car antenna level of thickness and with a nub on the end, so it's a little less pointy.
Few hundred grams kind of.
Yeah.
I think that'll depend. If it's one of these little pocket drones, I think that's just gonna be a no-go. It's not even gonna lift off. Forget controls. It's just the motors won't be powerful enough. But if you're thinking of something like a DJI sized drone,
the other week in our office, somebody took one of those off right next to the conference room for reasons that are still unclear. Still unclear. Just those people we never saw before in our office that has 10 people working it. Fly a drone around, and we're like, what is going on here? So that was really loud. I think that might hurt productivity. I think it needs to be a pocket drone. How long of a poker can we have on a pocket drone?
Nothing. Basically, these pocket drones have maybe a payload of a few grams. They're really working right on the hairy edge of functional. Mm-hmm. They're built to barely lift off kind of thing. So I think
maybe like a balsa wood stick.
How about we get rid of the stick?
Yeah.
And all we do is that the pocket drone has a cage around it. So just a thin plastic cage.
Oh, and it just hits you.
It just hits you. Exactly. It physically bumps into you because you'd want the cage anyway so that the drone can be hit the objects and it's not too bad, right?
All right. So since we're, I think at the time of this segment anyway, coming to a terrible manager near you, the Kamikaze 7000.
No.
Have you?
No. It's a terrible manager, right?
Yeah.
It's the ball buster.
The Ball Buster 7000. Now your terrible manager can infringe on your most private moments by flying a drone launched inside your house directly into your crotch. Available to any company willing to pay the $400 per month subscription, minimum order size 5 robots, 3-year annual commitment.
And inevitable lawsuits. All right. So moving on, how will we measure this robot success?
Well, I mean, I think to put it a different way, to put it a way that rhymes with reality much more. Ilia, I'm CEO of our little company, Polymath Robotics.
No.
Yep.
Oh God.
And Ballbuster 7000 to count other companies as well. You know, I get asked a lot how we're doing. You know, how's your progress going? Yeah. Is the robot roboting yet? How well can it do the robot? Give me numbers. Yeah. And I think it will inspire our team to type code faster if there is a dashboard on the wall with numbers that just increase and increase. And every time they see that number get bigger, they know our robot is more robot-y.
I love a good dashboard, to be serious.
Yeah.
Good dashboard makes a big difference.
So, hey, I mean, there's the revenue dashboard. That one's easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. What, I guess outside of the business side, what metrics can we throw on this dashboard so I know that we're roboting better than any of the other robots?
Yeah. I mean, fundamental ones, if you're operating a fleet like we do, is number of robots.
Yep. We can count that. That's good.
We can count that. Where are they in the world?
Yep.
Are they?
I guess what I really want to know is, like, are the robots
working? Exactly.
Are the robots better than they were last week?
Yeah. So that's the thing is one of the actual functional metrics we want to use is we want to start counting things like how far did we drive autonomously last week? Did we drive more this week? If we drove more, was it valid driving? Was it because somebody actually told us, or is it because we got lost and we had to drive around?
Well, in on-road driving, there's this metric that like a bunch of states require of miles per disengagement. So like, obviously, like, we should just track that.
Let's break that down.
As that gets better, we will be better.
Well, let's break that down. What does miles per disengagement mean?
You know, the number of miles your autonomous system drives before it has to turn off. Easy peasy.
And what do you mean by turn off?
You know, it doesn't work anymore.
So I think in a lot of these systems, they're assuming there's a human driver or at least a teleoperated driver who's there watching.
Well, yeah. But once your miles per disengagement are like 100, then you're safe for like a 2-4 mile trip, whatever.
Yeah. Interesting case. I think we've covered this tangentially, at least on a few of our other podcasts. But the really interesting one about miles per disengagement is it makes no mention of what test scenario you're in.
Or what a mile is.
Or what a mile is. Or what a disengagement means. Right? So if I really wanted to game the system, I could put my robot on a perfectly flat circular track with no obstacles, with perfect GPS coverage.
Yeah, your metric will be great.
And you just run it and run it and run it, and your metric will be fantastic. Nobody ever interrupts.
Metrics are good. Investors get on board and tend to make that sweet, sweet profit, baby.
Exactly. So it's not only a number, it's a number relative to something. It's a number relative to time span, to conditions, to like the particular thing you're trying to test. Yeah. Miles per disengagement sounds like a good idea, but is in reality pretty heavily gamed and not as representative as it should be.
I mean, it also just doesn't really mean that much.
It doesn't.
Like, frankly, like when I was going through YC with Starsky, we were asked, you know, our metric was how many miles are we driving a week? Well, at the time, you know, it was an accomplishment to turn the robot on and drive in a circle. But like after the first circle in the parking lot, the fifth was about the same as the fourth, as was about the same as the second. And we kind of didn't learn things in those succeeding circles one after the other. I think the challenge with measuring if the robot is roboting is essentially that what roboting is very different on a robot by robot basis.
Yeah, especially if you have different clients that have different business objectives.
Yeah.
Right? If you're trying to till a field versus if you're trying to move a mining vehicle, very different understanding of success.
Well, not even that. If you're trying to till a field and you're Farmer Joe who's been farming for 4 generations, or if you're trying to till a field and you're a $1 billion ag company,
Yeah.
and if you're trying to till a field and you're Trimble, there's all very different measures of like what the number is that means anything to them. Because for Farmer Joe, it's like, yeah, looks like you guys tilled the field. For the $1 billion ag company, it might be, okay, so you tilled the field at a cost of this as opposed to that other cost. I guess this makes sense. And for a more sophisticated player like a Trimble, like a Bear Flag, like a whoever, it's I don't know, your cross-track error was greater than this. These sorts of models were firing off the wrong numbers too much of the time.
Exactly. Part of that is you really got to think about what is the audience for your metric as well.
Mm-hmm.
Is this a business-focused metric like revenue, for example?
Mm-hmm.
Is this an engineering-focused metric like cross-track error on average over the last path? But the tempting thing to think of is if I can just think of the perfect metric, then if I see it go wrong, then I know that something's wrong. And realistically, that's very, very difficult, if not impossible to do. Mm-hmm. What we found is the best thing to do is have a bunch of metrics across different domains, and you have to track all of them to kind of get a sense of how your system is performing. But not only that, when things do go wrong, you have to correlate it to actual log data and sensor data and those kind of things.
What about metrics for safety, right? Like what metric means I'm safe?
Yeah. What sort of AI?
A question from a VC that we received in the last 6 months.
Yeah, that's great. I think the first person who could come up with a metric for safety would be very well off. It's probably not miles per disengagement.
Well, I mean, I think more broadly, an issue that we saw just the other day is a client has multiple cameras on their vehicle, and we saw a person walking around in the front right camera. They started walking towards the field of view of the front left camera, and they disappeared.
Yeah,
They were gone.
That's when we realized our cameras were not synchronized.
And the problem is this vehicle is I don't know, 20,000 pound vehicle.
Enormous.
It has mean looking claws. It can drive over any terrain. It is not something that you'd like to give you a little up tap when you're trying to parallel park.
Yeah.
So I guess in that case, Ilia, how do we use metrics, or how can you use metrics to, I mean, like, can't we just know if that picture is out of date, if that's an old image?
When we were talking about this earlier, I kind of was talking about kind of photon to photon delay. That would be the ideal case. So what you do...
And what would that mean?
Yeah, exactly. So what you do is basically imagine a photon hitting the camera sensor. Then the camera processes it, sends it to the computer sends it to the network sends it to your laptop shows it on your screen. The photon comes out of the screen and hits your eyeball. Like, what is the time from photon hitting the camera to photon hitting your eyeball? That's the ideal true latency measurement. It's also practically impossible to measure.
Yeah.
Because you got to have some atomically precise kind of light emitter on one end and atomically precise receiver on the other end. If you can't do that, which probably you can't, you got to step back to things like, does the sensor itself, the camera sensor, does it timestamp the image it's getting? The thing that it's timestamping with, is it actually correctly synchronized? Is that camera getting some accurate time pulse from GPS or from an NTP?
And can we have essentially a watchdog on it that emits a metric?
That's even next step, right? Like, First step is the image timestamped accurately, or does the camera have the wrong time, right? Next step is there should be a node somewhere on the computer that's receiving this image, checking the timestamp and understanding, is that timestamp valid versus the computer's time? If it is, how often is it coming in? If it's coming in too rarely, or if it's dropped out, then you could say, oh, I've lost camera connection. I should probably come to a safety stop.
And these sorts of heartbeats and watchdogs, like, it makes sense when you say it. Recently, a autonomous vehicle company crashed a vehicle specifically because they were going around a bend. They issued a steering command. The safety operator turned off the autonomous system, turned it back on 45 seconds later when the vehicle is now driving straight. And the output command of we're going around a bend, or perhaps the perception of we're driving around a bend, had not been properly timestamped, and the vehicle attempted to steered right into a barrier.
Yeah.
And this is like robotics 102. I mean, technically not 101.
Yeah, it's the next step, right? Like the problem that a lot of software engineers make is they treat robots as like slightly more mobile servers, and they're not, right? Like robots exist.
Well, the servers with like some grippers and stuff.
Yeah, servers with an arm, right? Like,
yeah.
But they're physically embodied, so they have to respect physics. They have to respect inertia. They have to respect those kind of things.
Physics is a conspiracy theory. It's not real. Fake news. Isaac Newton was a hoax.
We continue our slide conspiracy theme show instead of robotics. But yeah, so the main kind of, if I wanted to give one like default good, safe, best practice, is timestamp everything.
Yeah.
Timestamp your messages coming in, timestamp your messages coming in.
Yep.
Have an extremely good understanding of photon hitting a camera sensor all the way down to the wheels changing their motion because of that. So if you want to test this, your robot's going towards a corner, you throw a box in front of it. From the moment the box is visible on the camera to the moment the robot starts to brake, to slow down, figure out what that delay is and break it down and figure out what parts of your system are adding delays to that total value.
And how much of that delay is acceptable or how much of that delay is not.
Exactly.
Obviously, because of physics and things like the speed of light, you can't see something before the photon hits you.
Yeah.
Obviously, you also can't brake an 80,000-pound vehicle in 1 foot without significant heat being caused.
Or just tearing the ground apart. Yeah, I mean, speed of light probably will act the least on your total delay.
I think it's pretty passable.
Yeah, but your inertia will be a big deal. Big deal. So you can correct this with sensors that can see further away. Mm-hmm. They can see faster, so higher frame rate can help as well.
But how does, in terms of these metrics, I mean, something that people bring up a lot when it comes to safety is like a deterministic system. Can't you, if you have properly constructed heartbeats and watchdogs and just generally good metrics, can't you use non-deterministic things deterministically?
If I'm deterministic, what?
So like machine learning, for example.
Oh, I see it.
Right? Like if you say, this is a lane detecting model.
Yeah.
There's a finite range that the lane should change in any 10-foot span. If I see a change bigger than that, reject it.
Yeah. In the ideal case, yes. But the reality is, again, that machine learning models today have a very hard kind of cutting edge explainability or observability problem, where you can't actually explain why the model has made a particular decision.
Yeah.
And so because of that, you can't, in a safety sense, guarantee that the model will output the same value every time.
But you could say, I'm only going to listen to it if the range is within this particular area.
Well, range is in
the next expected value is this close to the last one.
Right.
So like I don't believe that humans magically disappear. So if I saw a human for 5 frames and I miss him on the 6th, then maybe I can say, there's something weird going on here. We should come to a stop.
Yeah, that could be done, but then you're kind of wrapping your ML model in a bunch of classical deterministic code, right?
Yeah.
So your ML model becomes kind of one more input. Yeah. Which, again, can work, but there's a lot of complexity on actually ensuring that that's safety rated, safety passable.
Yeah. We're just more talking about measurable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Safety measurable more than safety passable. So let's say we have our system. We have metrics coming out of every corner of it to understand how well it is or is not working. How do we then start to look at things like overall performance over time?
What you really want to do is you want to understand, does any particular software change or commit that you've made or your team has made, is it improving things? Are we moving in the right direction? So if you're measuring something like latency, has this release improved latency or reduced it or made it worse? So you really want to have this good understanding of your system.
Or if we're measuring cross-check error, is that getting worse or better when the same inputs are coming in and the same outputs are coming in?
Yeah, and again, for anything sufficiently complex, for any kind of complex system, it's very unlikely you're going to get a commit that improves everything across the board. It's almost always some sort of trade-off, right? Like you reduce latency, but now your accuracy is lower because you're using some heuristic. Or you're much more accurate, but now it takes twice as long to process. So making these kind of trade-offs and looping back to your original design intent and your safety documents and making sure you can justify why this increase in latency, for example, is acceptable and that you're still within bounds. And sometimes the answer is it's not acceptable and you have to redo it.
Yeah. When we're thinking about what a general metric might be and how all those different things feed into it, I think it comes to how reliably can we do the job that the customer cares about?
Yeah. And those are business facing metrics, right? Again, you're going to have these kind of full range of some metrics are facing your particular client, their use cases. Some are very pure engineering, cost of error, for example, latency.
Let's come up with a particular metric for a particular industry so we can stop just saying it depends.
Yeah. Okay.
As a global answer to all hard questions.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit too lawyery there.
Yeah. So what's a good use case for us to think about? Maybe we could think about an office robot.
Sure. Back to our example.
And a less obnoxious one than the ball buster 7000. Maybe we're looking more at just a telepresence robot. So we're a telepresence robotics company. We want to compete against Double Robotics and whoever else is in the space. I frankly know no one besides that. And we're talking to somebody and we want to say, hey, you should buy our robot over Double's.
Yeah. I think from the business side, you'd be looking at engagement. You'd be looking at what's up.
I'm laughing because it's hard to think of any real technical metric that customer would ever actually care about, which is kind of true across the board here.
Yeah. Again, your business succeeds despite your robots.
Yeah.
Well, we can come up with some, right? Like there are some technical metrics. So business one would be things like how often is your system used? How happy are your people with your system? Those are classic kind of web-based stuff. A technical one would be something like how long does your robot run on a charge?
Yep.
Like how long is your battery life?
Yep.
How many errors do your customers get when they use your web page to interface with it?
To maybe talk a little bit more about the main types of areas that we're interested in.
Yeah.
A little bit higher stakes. Let's talk about spraying chemicals in the field. So in that use case, you have let's say autonomous tractor or autonomous self-propelled sprayer that is spraying chemical throughout the field. The ideal speed is that we're driving at 2 miles per hour, spraying some number of gallons per some unit of time, a gallon a minute, maybe. I really don't know.
Sure. Your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah. Yeah. How do we build the metric story of this is a good robot? You should buy our sprayer over Gus's.
Yeah. I would assume what you would care about would be things like how many times has your tractor gone over a specific area? Because you really don't want to compact down the soil. You're going to damage it if you keep driving the same place over and over. So optimal path planners would be important, right?
But that's only like a only the optimal global path planner. Like don't drive past the same lines over and over.
Yeah, and local even, right? So imagine you're spraying the same area month after month after month.
Yeah.
You don't want to control to exactly the same tire ruts you made last time.
Yes.
Or maybe you do, right? Like depending on what kind of crop.
Yeah.
Like you might want to shift intentionally your local path a little bit left, a little bit right to not dig grooves into the ground.
But this all seems to me like a metric a farmer doesn't care about.
Yeah. The technical metrics. A farmer probably would care about how much sprayer are you using.
Yeah. Are you reliably only spraying a gallon per minute?
Exactly.
Are you reliably driving at 2 miles an hour when you're in the row?
I mean, I don't even think he cares about that. I think he cared.
Well, no, 2 miles an hour in the row. Sorry. Are you reliably only applying 1 cup of chemical
Bingo.
per vehicle?
Exactly.
And is the 1 cup you're applying mostly sticking to that plant?
Exactly.
Whatever mostly means.
Exactly. Yeah, right. He cares about inputs or sheet, cares about inputs of material and outputs in terms of crop.
So in other words, what we figured out here is that if you're trying to build a robot for someone like a farmer, the better your robot is, you don't get much credit for. Your technical metrics don't really win you any deals or make you any more money.
Yeah. Yeah, especially there's a really spoofy like ML based ones of, our model has this kind of error rate and is this accurate across fields, and like that makes no difference.
I remember seeing some now publicly traded autonomy companies, Series B decks, where they said, here's our ML model, here's how reliable it is, here's its improvement over the last 6 months, here's its projected improvements over the next 6. It's going to be amazing.
That's total nonsense. That is literally useless. Yeah, that will make no difference in the grand scheme of things. Unless your entire business is building effective ML models, that's not going to make a difference.
So let's say your business is just building a robot, because, this is, again, a How to Build Robots podcast. So what are then the actual technical metrics for making sure that we can spray that field and that we actually are doing, let's say we're not competing against a competitor, because our customers aren't going to care about our technical metrics versus competitors, but we just want to make sure the engineering team is effectively mushing and effectively making the robot better.
Building stuff. Yeah. So key technical metrics there are things like, how long did it take to compute a path, which generally is fast, but it could be quite a long time if it's very large.
A global path or a local path?
Both.
Yeah.
Both, right? How accurately are you keeping to the desired path? Did you cover the entire area efficiently, or did you have to backtrack? Things like, as you're driving, something you don't want to do, especially with real vehicles, is continuously to jerk the steering back and forth constantly.
Yep.
So your acceleration and jerk parameters over your path.
How not nice your robot.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Not nice both visually and mechanically. A lot of customers, it's funny, I've noticed, because they're seeing a robot and they don't understand the detail of what's gone into it, they're going to judge the robot by how confident it looks.
Yeah.
And if your robot's constantly kind of nudging, steering back and forth,
Looks like a crappy robot.
it looks terrible, even if that's technically more efficient.
It almost makes you think maybe there's some folks who have built robots that only update their path every 10 meters because they're not good at controls, but it's a simpler way to make it look like they are.
Look like it's smooth. Exactly. Yeah. What else? What are the technical metrics? Just basics like how, as your software gets more complex, crashes, second recoveries, how often are you...
Do you mean crashes as in collisions, or do you mean crashes as in the system no longer is up and running?
Both.
Yeah.
Realistically, in a complex system, you don't have just one software node, you have a bunch of them.
Yep.
And so is any particular one of them faulting for some reason? Yeah.
So metrics are pretty obviously important, not just because I want them on the dashboard, but primarily because that's how we know if our system's actually improving or not. I'd expect then that like the metrics ecosystem in robotics is incredibly well built out. There's great tooling. Everyone uses the same standards for the tooling, even though there's some, this metric's good for this company, that metric's good for that company, right?
Yeah, I would love that to be the case. That would have been wonderful. That would have saved us a lot of effort. Unfortunately, we're pretty heavy ROS and ROS 2 users. Mm-hmm. And in the ROS community, at least, there's not a lot of focus on this. We've started to publish some stuff.
Why not?
That's a great question.
Yeah, probably because there's not that many real robots.
It might be because there are not that many real robots. It might be because people don't see the benefit of this. The most common question, even in our engineering team when we introduced it, was the kind of question of like, well, isn't this just log messages or ROSBag files? Like, why not just ROSBag this? Why would you need metrics? That approach, doesn't scale to tens of thousands or millions of robots because ROSBags from an autonomous vehicle are terabytes in size. You each can't sling that much data. But secondarily,
that you just don't want to hang out with a ROSBag. You don't want to be called a ROSBag.
Yeah.
You don't want to be a ROSBag.
We have team shirts. I'm sure we'll sell them someday.
Yeah.
Just called Total ROSBag.
On our merch store.
Yeah, exactly. On our feature merch store. Thank you to our wonderful producer, Nicole, for designing and putting those together. But yeah, but even more importantly, imagine you had all the compute and storage and networking in the world. As an engineer, I don't want to sit through 3 hours of ROSBags trying to find the 30 seconds where my thing went wrong.
Yep.
What I want is a system on board that automatically flags my ML model confidence dropped below a certain value, or I detected a collision, or whatever.
Yep.
And
absolutely.
And correlate those metrics with your more rich ROSBags and log files and those kind of things.
Or with other metrics that might be leading indicators that there's going to be a problem.
Exactly.
Like maybe every time we need to come to a sudden stop, 100 milliseconds beforehand, a human randomly pops up on the screen.
Yeah.
We weren't expecting.
And
that happened because we stopped getting messages from the camera for 200 milliseconds.
Exactly.
And one could say that if when you stopped getting messages from that camera for 200 milliseconds, if a watchdog saw that and ordered an emergency stop, you might have been slightly safer.
Yeah.
One could say.
One could say that. But yeah, one final note on this. A trick that we put on our blog post and on metrics.
Well, we should share about the fact that we have a blog post.
Yeah.
Made some stuff open source.
Yeah. So we do have a blog post on our website on metrics and Rosbags by very talented intern David. Is happily returning.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Mostly because we kidnapped him.
But basically.
Yeah.
That was the effort.
No one here works willingly. Please let me go.
So he had a great blog post about that, and in there we talk about how we correlate metrics in more rich bag files. But what kind of final trick to mention here is a lot of times when you have a problem with a robot, when it hits something, the actual thing that went wrong happened a minute ago or 30 seconds ago. And so what you really want is you want kind of a rolling buffer of data on board that is storing this terabytes per second generated, but you don't want to store all of it to disk. You'll run out of disk in a day or less. So what you want is you want a rolling buffer that only actually stores to disk when a metric detects or when a metric fires, like a collision or ML certainty or whatever. That allows you to get kind of the best of both worlds, both really rich data, but also not hours and hours of it.
Yeah. And that's how you get to a world where you can make robot more faster.
I couldn't have put it better myself. And on that super eloquent note, I think we'll close this one out. Next week, we're going to talk about making a business case for your robot and how to actually build a business other than just fight your robots, as we keep saying.
Primarily kamikaze flying your drone into your employee's crotch. That's number one business.
Yeah.
We'll see you all next week.
Signing off.
Space Cowboy.